Hey guys, Lou here, aka the DFS Data Dad, to break down the Sunday main slate for the wildcard round. I'm going to go through all of the different positions, pick out some key players that I think are worth the investment in the main slate when building your lineups, and we're going to try to do our best to win some money and ultimately try to win that $1 million prize. So if you're playing today on Saturday, as of this recording, best of luck. If you drafted any best ball teams, if you watched any of my previous recordings or previous videos that I released, you know that I did about 20 best ball drafts. Got a pretty good mix of players throughout all of those drafts, and we're going to hope for the best and try to make it to the final round of best ball. Didn't make it to the final round this regular season, but since starting this channel, we're going to do our best to make it to the final round. So let's get right into it. Let's just do a quick overview of what we're looking at in terms of implied team totals for Sunday's slate. We have the Bills leading the slate with 28 projected points. We have the Bucks at about 27. We have the Eagles at 25 versus the Packers. And then we have our underdogs here, starting with the Commanders, projecting nearly 24 points. Green Bay Packers at 20.5 and the Denver Broncos at 19.5. So if we are looking at our quarterbacks, we know that Josh Allen is going to be the most expensive quarterback on the slate with very good reason, because if you look at his history, he has the capability to score 40, 50 fantasy points, and he's on a team attached to the highest point total on the slate. Just looking at the type of matchup that he has, he's the third most efficient QB in the NFL against man coverage, and Denver runs man coverage at a very high rate. So this is considered a highly advantageous matchup for Josh Allen. The only worry I have with playing Allen is throughout the whole fantasy season, he did not really elevate, and it's not a him problem. I think it's just the way that the offense is orchestrated. But typically stacking is a common strategy that people use to win GPPs. But if you look at all of Josh Allen's pass catchers, it's rare that he brings it's rare that he brings two or more with him when he has one of his big days, because his big days can come on the ground, or his big day can also include passing yards to his running backs. Like Ray Davis can break off a big play, Ty Johnson can break off a big play, James Cook can break off big plays. So it's just really hard to project who's going to have the big day with Josh Allen. That's my only qualm with playing him. If you want to play him naked and try to fit in some other positional players with him, I think that's a good play. But just do know the ability for Josh Allen to bring a receiver with him does not look very likely. But that can change in the playoffs. Next up, we have Jaden Daniels in a game where this is the highest projected point total on the slate. Should be a fun game to watch. Jaden Daniels has a lot going for him in terms of matchup. He ranks 4th passing grade against zone coverage, and Tampa Bay is a team that runs zone coverage the most out of any other team in the league. So it could be a matchup that bodes well for him. And on the other side, Baker Mayfield also matches up with the type of defense that the Commanders run. So it goes to be no surprise that this is the highest projected point total on the game. Both of these defenses have obvious weaknesses, right? Like the Bucks give up a lot of yards to wide receivers and a lot of fantasy points to wide receivers. The Commanders, Baker torched them earlier, first game of the season, for 4 touchdowns, almost 300 yards, ran for 20 yards as well. They also don't have a very good run defense, so when we get to the running back position, Bucky Irving looks like a pretty strong play for Sunday. But yeah, both of these quarterbacks have pretty advantageous matchups in a nice fantasy-friendly environment, as we call it. And both of them can, easily make the case to be played. Jalen Hurts looks like he's good to go from his injury. Looked like he was trying to get over a concussion the last week of the season, and he cleared protocol. The only issue with Jalen Hurts is obviously, a lot of the offense goes through him on the ground as well with his legs and Saquon Barkley's legs. It is a low volume passing offense. Green Bay Packers are pretty good against the pass. They have corners that can hang with the likes of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So if Jalen Hurts is going to have a big game, I don't think it's going to be through the air. It's most likely going to be with his legs and tush push, and kind of similar to Josh Allen. Might be hard for him to elevate receivers alongside his big fantasy day. I don't think I need to cover too much with Saquon Barkley here. Pretty good run blocking advantage for the Eagles against the Packers. He's a focal part of the offense. I mean, geez, he is getting nearly 30 touches a game. Highly likely that he goes for over 100 yards. Highly likely that he gets into the end zone. I think $8,500 is a fair price for him and a price I am willing to pay for a guy attached to an offense, a guy that's pretty much the focal point of the offense, and a team that is projected to score a lot of points. Next up is Bucky Irving. He will probably be the most popular running back on the slate, all for good reason. He has taken over the number one role with from Rachaad White in this Tampa Bay Bucs offense. He is also another guy who's seeing pretty good volume, over 20 touches per game. He has big playability as a rusher and a receiver. He's a focal part of this offense. He's attached to an offense that's expected to score the second most points on the slate. He's playing against a Commanders defense that's bottom 5 in defenses versus running backs. They allowed the most yards gained before contact. Bucky Irving is looking like a clear lineup lock, especially for only $7,000. We'll just touch on Josh Jacobs. Not a very good matchup for him going up against the Eagles defense. Potentially falling victim to game script, especially if the Eagles get out ahead. But again, volume is the name of the game, and we know in the playoffs you want your best players on the field. He had over 300 rushing attempts this year. He had 16 touchdowns. I know a lot of people weren't exactly bullish on Josh Jacobs this year. I actually was when it came to best ball, so I'm happy to be right about that one. But yeah, focal part of the offense runs through him. They lose an element to their offense with no Christian Watson. And again, you'll know that I don't really think Christian Watson had much of an impact on this offense this year, but when you do have somebody with his size and speed, you do have to account for it on the defensive side of the ball. But yeah, I just don't see the Packers making this close offensively. If this game is going to be close, it's going to be because their defense is able to neutralize the offensive power of the Eagles. So James Cook kind of has a tough matchup. He doesn't see a lot of volume like some of these other running backs, but I think he should. He's gotten to 100 yards on limited attempts. So if he does have a big game, it's probably going to be on lower volume, but just more efficiency. And that doesn't match up well with the Broncos, who don't really allow many yards per carry. They're a pretty stringent run defense. So I don't really love James Cook here. If he was a clear number one back and was getting all the snaps and getting the volume of somebody like Bucky Irving and Saquon Barkley, maybe I'd have a little more interest. Also, a lot of his points lately are coming off of touchdown equity. I'd say out of all the running backs, including Josh Jacobs, that we reviewed so far, I might be interested in James Cook the least. And that could come to bite me. But yeah, in DFS, you have to make a stand. And just based on the numbers I'm seeing right now, it's kind of hard to love James Cook. Also kind of hard to love guys like Brian Robinson, somebody that I loved going into best ball this year. Really stout Tampa Bay Bucs run defense. Could fall victim to game script, could lose snaps to Austin Eckler. Which brings me to a few of my discount backs here. Let's just talk about Jaleel McLaughlin lately. The Bills actually do have a weakness on defense, and it is their run D. I know that Javonte Williams is the number one, still has been the number one. But from what I've seen as of late, Jaleel McLaughlin's been getting some volume. I think he's a good receiver. Just doesn't see enough volume that he should to pay off price tags. But there is some efficiency there when he touches the ball. We see 6 to 7 yards per carry on multiple instances. Maybe he should be getting more looks than Javonte Williams. There's been a few games this year where Javonte has just gotten a lot of receptions, targeted as a receiver out of the backfield a lot. Right, we had this 11 target game against the Chargers. Only converted that into 12 fantasy points. So yeah, I think Denver is going to utilize running backs here. And if I were to pick one out of the three among McLaughlin, Javonte Williams, and Audric Estime, it's probably McLaughlin. And then similarly with Austin Eckler, he's back from injury. He was out for about 6 weeks. We know he's a great receiver. We know as a rusher he's kind of lost some burst. But considering what the game script is looking like, they might need to leverage him more as a receiver out of the backfield to hang in with the Tampa Bay Bucks. So another guy I think that we should consider for our lineups this week. All right, we will start with Mike Evans. Schematically, he matches up well against the Commanders. I don't think that the Commanders have corners that can cover Mike Evans, although they do have Marshawn Lattimore, and we know the history between Evans and Lattimore. But I don't think that'll matter. Against the Commanders, week 1, caught 5 balls for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, the main focal point for Baker Mayfield when he's throwing the ball. Strong play, clear, obvious play for me here. We'll just stick to this game. Terry McLaurin, same thing, kind of matches up pretty well against the Bucks here. If the Commanders do fall subject to having to play catch-up, we could see an increase in targets for Terry McLaurin here. Again, not too many corners on the Bucks that can probably hang with him. And we know that Jaden Daniels has been locking on him as of late, just looking at his target share. And then in this game, we also do have Jalen McMillan, who's burst on the scene as of late. Not as many targets as Mike Evans, but we can see, ever since he's really developed a role here in the offense, he has just been scoring touchdowns. So it's kind of hard to ignore that. Also gets some looks as a runner, whether they do jet sweeps or not. So I also think McMillan, considering his price relative to some of these other higher priced receivers, is a great play as well. And then one other receiver I want to hit on who's really cheap is Olamide Zaccheaus. Really has developed into the wide receiver 2 here for the Commanders. Whether or not Austin Eckler coming back impacts his contributions to the offense is TBD. But Jaden Daniels has been looking his way, and he's also somebody that's kind of hard to ignore. For 4,400, you can kind of play out the theory of, and this goes for both sides, the Bucks and the Commanders. What if one of those defenses takes away the best receiver? The second receiver becomes a more heavily targeted receiver and can pay off value. So Zaccheaus, also somebody I think worth rostering when it comes to building GPPs. Next up, we have A.J. Brown going up against the Green Bay Packers. Will be covered by Nixon, Valentine, and Bullard. 2 of those 3 are very low when it comes to cornerback grades, which makes A.J. Brown project very well. Only thing worth noting here is that Eagles' offense really runs through Barkley and Hurts. It's a low-volume passing offense, but even though it's low passing, it's very condensed, as in the ball is really only going to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, or Dallas Goedert. I know that the opposing rank could potentially scare some people off, making A.J. Brown lower owned. Let's just see what that looks like. We'll go to RotoWire. Let's go to Where's the lineup optimizer? DFS optimizer. And let's just try to get a feel of ownership here for tomorrow's slate. All right. Sheesh. I don't know. I don't know how accurate these are, but Bucky Irving at 92% is wild. Okay, so out of the top receivers, right, we see Mike Evans at 46%, AJ Brown at 43%. So my assumption there is kind of wrong. He's still going to be highly owned, but he's in a great matchup, so it makes sense. Same thing can be said for Devontae Smith. Low volume passing offense, matches up well against the Green Bay Packers corners. We know he's going to be getting volume, even though it's a low passing offense. Yeah, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, no Christian Watson. Game script can favor them. They did play the Eagles earlier this year. We did see Jaden Reed go off for 138 yards and a touchdown. Not somebody who's going to be a contested, catch wide receiver. Maybe they'll give him some screens. Maybe they'll be able to break him loose out in the secondary. Romeo Doubs is more of your chain mover guy. Runs, traditional standard wide receiver routes. Going to be seeing more volume, I think, now that Christian Watson's out. But I definitely think he has a tough assignment with these Eagles corners going up against. Khalil Shakir. Probably out of all the receivers on the Bills, he's probably the one I trust the most. Probably sees the most volume out of all of them. But again, any one of these can be the receiver that goes off and has the big day on the Bills. Could be Shakir. Could be Amari Cooper, which I think a lot of us were expecting once he was acquired by the Bills. Really just hasn't had that big day yet. He did have a 14-target game against the Rams, but since then, only 2-3 targets at a time. But out of all the wide receivers on the Bills, it looks like Keon Coleman projects the most, since he wins a lot against man coverage, and the Broncos run man at a high clip. Just hasn't been that efficient lately. But let's see, maybe that'll all change for the playoffs here, and they might utilize him a little more. Then the other thing to note, just as of late, Marvin Mims has really broke on the scene and earned the trust of Sean Payton in the offense, I think. 2 touchdowns in each of his last 2 games, scoring 33 and 22 fantasy points. Just draws a bad matchup against Buffalo. And we all know that the Denver Broncos like operating the offense using multiple running backs. So kind of hard to trust the wideouts in this spot. But just based on recency bias, Marvin Mims looks like a pretty good cheap value play. And then for tight end, most of my interest, I'm not going to get too deep into this here. Really there's 5 playable tight ends on the slate, right? Probably Zach Ertz, the one I have the most interested in, just because of how much volume he's seeing. Game environment's friendly for him. I think he does match up pretty well against the linebackers on the Bucs. So I have some interest in Zach Ertz. Dalton Kincaid is also the other guy I have the most interest in, and that's because maybe on the outside, the Broncos are pretty strong. Pat Surtain, which means maybe the Bills try to use the middle of the field a little more, and Dalton Kincaid gets a bump in usage. He's cheaper, only by a couple $100 than Zach Ertz. He's younger. He's, as of right now, the better prospect, more explosive player. I think Ertz just gets a lot of his points from touchdowns too and receptions. But either one of these two, I think I have the most interest in. Dallas Goedert, it's hard to get excited about. It's going to be, the 4th variable in that offense, especially against a defense that plays zone pretty well. So I'll have some interest in Goddard, but not as much as the other two. All right, so if we want to build a sample lineup, we'll build one lineup where it's very obvious who to pick, and then we'll build another one that's maybe not so obvious. So I think the obvious one here is looking at the Bucs, right? Like Baker Mayfield, as of late, has just been on a tear. Threw 41 touchdowns this year, 4,500 yards, just had a really good year. So we will take Baker, we'll stack him with all of his targets, right? Bucky Irving, stack him with Mike Evans, and we'll stack him with Jalen McMillan. So if the Bucs do score a lot of points, we're maximizing how many points we're actually getting within our lineup from them. I think out of all of the offenses here on the slate, I am the least worried in terms of having to defend. I'm the least worried about the Green Bay Packers. We'll drop in the Eagles. Defense, part of the bring back here will be Zach Ertz. Gives us $5,100 to fill in 3 more spots. Out of all the running backs here, I probably like Barkley the most. I don't think that we'll be able to fit him in here. But let's just see if there's any cheap plays that we can fit in. Vele, somebody I didn't really talk about, but somebody I think that we can consider here. Just sees low volume, but if he does get in the end zone for $4,100, I think he pays off the price tag. I might have to go with Zacchaeus here, right? Like if Jaden Daniels is throwing the ball, it's going to either McLaurin, Zacchaeus, Ertz. So let's just pretend like the Commanders are going to try to phase out Terry McLaurin. That's the guy they want to cover. Ball's going to one of these two guys. Right? So we have $5,500 here, which makes it hard to get to some of these other running backs. Let's just, what do the wide receivers look like here? All right, we have Jaden Reed, we have AJ Brown. Devontae Smith is $5,700. So we could go with one of these guys. Out of all of these here, who has the best matchup? It's Devontae Smith, followed by Terry McLaurin and Vele. Yeah. It's hard to pick. If we fill in with Smith here, it gives us $5,400, and we're really throwing a dart here with our RB2. Maybe we're overlooking defense here, which I don't think that we are. We could move around McMillan. We could move Kincaid here. Now we have $5,700. Devontae Smith is less expensive than Terry McLaurin. Yeah, this is a tough call. We could go Ertz, and we could go 2 tight end. Kincaid gives us $7,100, and we could get James Cook. Right, and then we have $400 left over. What has De'Ami Brown done as of late? Because he's also the other wide receiver that could potentially make plays for. All right, considering that De'Ami Brown has gotten 5-4 targets, only 1 touchdown this year, maybe we can get some salary relief with him. Gives us $1,400 to spend here. So then we have $6,600. We could either pay up $1,800 for Barkley, and then we have $4,800 here for a receiver. So then maybe let's flip. We'll go Barkley, and we have $4,800. Let's go Keon Coleman. Now this is a very risky lineup. I It's not for the faint of heart. Man, where's McMillan again? McMillan's $5,200. Is there any way that we can get some more salary relief to get $400 here to get McMillan in? The question is probably not. Bucks. Yeah, that's tough. It's a tough one to swing. Eagles, Barkley, Coleman. We'll leave it at that. We'll just have to hope that Evans has the mega day. Yeah, so that's a possible lineup. Let's clear. Let's try to work something else in that might be a little less popular. We could go for an Eagles onslaught. We could go for a Bills onslaught. We could also go Jaden. We can go McLaurin. We're pretty much building the same lineup here. And let's leave Mike Evans out of this one. And let's pull in McMillan. And let's pull in Ertz. Let's pull in the Eagles D again. Gives us $5,400 here. Is there a cheap Tampa Bay wideout that we are not thinking of? Sterling Shepard's back for $3,300. Maybe let's plug him in and see what that gives us in terms of salary. I have a really hard time getting away from Barkley here. $4,400. Zacchaeus. Hey, that doesn't look too bad. We have Daniels, Irving, Barkley, McLaurin, McMillan, Sterling Shepard, Ertz, Zacchaeus. So yeah, I have a hard time going with any stacks outside of that Tampa Commanders game because their offenses are so projectable. I would lean towards the Eagles, but getting all those guys is really dang expensive. And then the Bills, it's just really hard to project where the ball is going unless you set up multiple configurations there, right? Like, let's go with Allen. Let's go with Cook. Let's go with Kincaid. And let's go with Shakir. And hell, let's just go with... So I have these keys on my keyboard to tell my program when to pause and stop. I just realized I've been talking for a really long time and I don't know when I stopped. So what I was just rambling about is you can go with a full-on Bills onslaught here, right? And, we have Allen, Cook, Shakir, Coleman, Kincaid, 5 Bills, bring it back with Marvin Mims, fill in some pieces with the Bucks and Commanders, and hope for the best. But anyways, those are my thoughts on the slate for tomorrow. Really appreciate if you guys can comment or subscribe. And best of luck to anybody playing today on Saturday and playing on Sunday. And we'll be back on Monday to review how everything went this weekend. So best of luck. Thanks for watching, and see you guys soon.